Folks, welcome back to the Crossing Swords podcast, where sometimes our signals get crossed, but our swords always are. And don't you worry, don't you fret. Even though your Buffalo Sabres are not playing well, we have a man who is playing well. He is killing it online, killing it in his coverage of this Bills, Bulls, Sabres, Canisius, you name it. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Mike Bunt. Bunty, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. The UB Bulls just won a bowl game. Sean Dolak's probably going to the NFL soon. I'm feeling great, man.
You can't beat that at all. And surprise, 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 we have Mr. Maniac joining us today. Sir, how you doing right now?
Oh, it is a bright new tomorrow, Bunty and Gatesy. Let me just tell you something. As of right now, the Sabres are 0-0 in my books. Let's clean the slate. Let's not judge these guys, okay? Let's just watch. Let's see what can happen. Let's see if they can put together, not even 60 minutes. Let's just put together 20 minutes out the gate here in Vegas. Let's see what's going on because, I don't mean to be a bit of a lion myself, but I think there's a roaring kitty situation happening with these Sabres prices. I mean, I'm looking at Sabres gambling odds right now as GameStop. You guys know, I don't have to tell both of you. Listen, it's been frustrating. This organization doesn't know how to win, for sure. As an organization, most definitely. But these guys are giving it their all. And I think they're going to be fighting over these next 20 games. So with that said, you may have seen it on Twitter. You may have seen it on MySpace. We are gambling. We are betting on the Sabres these next 20 days, these next 20 games. We are going to be believers. And I think that they're going to be underpriced. You know that this team is so much better than 3 wins and 15 losses in its last 18 games. You both know that.
Yes. I will say that. Bunty won't say it. I mean, there's been games they should have won.
No, I agree with that too. I thought he had more to say right there. I'm letting him speak.
I think we lost him.
Wow.
I'm still here. We got fucking chaos, but I'll tell you what won't be chaos. It's going to be the Sabres against the Knights tonight. I'm not going to take your shine away, but we just had to get this out as an announcement. We're going to be tracking this, so I'm going to be foot to the fire. If the Sabres go, 0-5 out of the gate here, am I going to be in trouble? Am I going to blink? No. The answer is no. So let's go, and let's go Buffalo.
Hey, yeah, heard it here first. Maniac's going to be riding with the Sabres, money line. $100 a game. We're going to be tracking it. And honestly, this might put Trainwreck under if the Sabres don't perform. So for all of us, we're hoping the Sabres can get some W's, keep the good things flowing here in Buffalo. But right now, the Sabres are sitting at 14-20-5. Bunty, I think the last time we did this, they're around 500. They're very much not around 500 right now. I know you're had your piece online about the state of the Sabres and everything, but how are you feeling right now after, a 13-game losing streak? They've lost 15 of their last 18. Here we are now.
Yeah, things are pretty awful right now. The 13-game losing streak just became comedy at halfway through when and Maniac's right. Like, this is not a team that should be going on 13-game losing streaks. Like, I'm not going to say they're good, but like, that's just insane. And then they respond with a 3-game winning streak. You start feeling a little bit better about them. They lose one, a tough one against the Stars that they honestly played all right in, and not great, but they had a chance going late into the third period. And then the Colorado game, again, you just find a way to absolutely just blow a game that you have no right losing. And that's what upsets me so much with the squad is how many games have they just given away this year? I think I saw a stat they're 2-2-3 when the opposing team switches their goalie this year. Like, you should that's 7 games where you got a total of 7 points. You should at least have at least 12 points in those games. Like, you shouldn't be 2-2-3 when the other team switches their goalie. And I'm just really frustrated because, as I said before the season, I do think there's talent on this team, but for whatever reason, it's taken longer than I thought for a lot of these young guys to grow and develop. And once you get to this point, you start wondering, like, is it ever going to happen? And they never really surrounded them with enough high-level veterans in the last few years. Zucker was a great addition this offseason. He's been fantastic, but even he hasn't been enough. And I think at times, too, what frustrates me is the guys that are expected to be the leaders on this team just don't step up to the challenge of filling that leadership void. I love Rasmus Dahlin, and I think he's the most important player on this team. We saw them go on that losing streak without him. But at times, I feel like this team is undisciplined, whether that be taking dumb penalties in dumb moments, whether that be being foolish with the puck in important moments, or just not knowing their responsibilities. You look at all the guys that have the A's on their chest, and the guys that are falling down in big moments. Tage Thompson turns it over in overtime in a moment where you can't afford it. And not only is it a turnover, it's a turnover that leads to a breakaway when your team just allowed 2 goals in 3 minutes. You have Cousins out of position in an important stretch in the final 20 seconds. You could go on and on and on and on. You have Samuelson icing the puck when he has a moment to flip it up and maybe even take a step or a stride or two to see where to put the puck. It's just such a mentally fragile group. And it's just so aggravating to watch on a nightly basis. Because I'll say this, Gatesy. Somebody said to me on Twitter, "Oh, have you been watching them all season? They can't hang with Colorado." No, they absolutely hung with Colorado. They took it to Colorado. They had a 4-0 lead in the first game. They can hang with Colorado. The difference is when other teams respond with their gut punch, our team just shrivels up. And that to me is just a team full of fragile personalities, and that's what's frustrating to me because they can play hockey. They mentally are weak as hell.
Yeah, and that's been my biggest takeaway through these first 39 games is we talked all offseason. Bringing Lindy Ruff in is going to be a great thing for the Sabres team to get a change of culture in, where we've seen, we have the talent there in the room. We see it, in a game that they lose to Colorado last. The talent's there on the ice. It's keeping it through the full 60 and having the right culture, the right game plan to go along with it. And I think we're all really hoping that, whether that be, thinking about this team from 15 years ago, and with the Lindy Ruff squad, and it's just not there right now. I mean, we've seen glimpses of, them starting to turn a page and then they'll lose 13 straight games. And that's kind of been my biggest takeaway is the culture of the Sabres is not, we know it wasn't good. I was hoping to see it in a better spot than where it's at now, where, we all remember the past month, how bad it was, the losses, the quotes we're seeing out of the locker room. I mean, even the broadcast team last night, I know we put out the tweet of what Razor said, talking about the Avs, but after, the goal that the Avalanche tied it in, and then the goal where they scored in overtime, you just hear an audible just sigh, just so sad coming from him. And as it should be. I mean, he's basically saying what we're all thinking, what we're all saying already. It's disappointing. And it's just, we see what happened with the Bills. Everyone's talked to death about the palm trees and, Buffalo is not a place where people want to go. The Bills got that through their culture. They brought in Sean McDermott, who, as much as people like to make fun of him for clapping on the sidelines, doing his little things, he turned the culture of the Buffalo Bills around in that locker room to where they're winners now. How many times throughout the past forever would the Bills find new ways to lose games? Granted, they still like to do that from time to time, but they're a winning team. And the Sabres are in that slump now where they just find new ways to lose, and they're in that loser mindset where we know when it rains, it pours for them. They need to find a way to break that habit and just believe in themselves and find a way to change that culture, Bunty. But I don't know if you have any more to say on that, but
I think a lot of it is confidence. I think a lot of it is, confidence and being fragile are normally connected with each other. If you're not confident in yourself, you're not going to make the plays that you need to make to play winning hockey. And I guess what I get frustrated is there's so many opportunities in that final 2 minutes to just calm down, relax, and get things done. And they just can't find a way to execute when the going gets tough. And it's not just in moments against tough teams like Colorado. Think about every time they get around 500 and then they suddenly lose 3 games. They can't play when there's any pressure on them. And that's just a sign of a weak team. And my biggest takeaway right now is that this really isn't a coaching issue. This is a roster issue. And I don't know if it's going to get better with these guys. You might need to make some moves to get rid of some of these guys. And the problem is, you make a mistake on which guys you move on from, and then you're in even bigger crap going forward. And then obviously that's what Kevin Adams is trying to avoid. He's trying to avoid making a rash decision where he gives up somebody like a Tage or somebody that's a star, and then they end up killing it elsewhere. But at this point, like, I don't know what you really do. Like, what I would say now is I don't think I can blame Don Granato for what happened last year. I don't think I can blame individual players. I think it's just a collection of soft players that just that don't play well in a structure, and they don't do what their coaches ask of them. You think of the best hockey they've played the last 3 years is when they had literally no structure at all. They were just allowed to play free. And what happened a lot that year? They would go up by 3 and they would blow leads constantly.
Yeah.
They won a lot of games, but they also blew a lot of games. And how do you ultimately get consistency in hockey? By having structure, by knowing what your responsibilities are, and by doing your roles. And I think what's happened over the game of hockey in recent years and why it's tougher for teams to really turn things around is I think there was a period of hockey going back 20 years, 10 years, whatever, where you had a lot of slower veterans that played physical, where these young kids were just fast and they could just go in the league right away, and they could take advantage of these older, slower players. There's so much skill in this league right now that I think it's harder than ever for young players to enter the game and have a high impact right away.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you're struggling to be able to attract free agents without giving up an arm and a leg, and you can't trade for people because most people have no trade clauses to your organization, really, like, what your approach has to be is youth and development. And we've seen the Sabres, unfortunately, over the years, push these guys into the NHL really quickly. And what age do they get figured out at? 23, 24, 25, 26. And it's just, there's too many guys on this team that were expected to take leaps, if not last year, this year. And the leaps aren't happening. And there's just not enough depth across the roster to survive these losses. Jordan Greenway was probably going to be an important piece on this team, and he's been out for this stretch. Dahlin, during the losing streak, was out for most of it. I still think a lot of the times the Sabres don't play horrible hockey. They just find horrible ways to lose, and their record indicates they're a bad team. And obviously the play on the ice does too, but it's frustrating because there's elements and aspects of this team where you're like, yeah, they could build off of this. But whenever they have something that they can build off, like 2 years ago, scoring, went away the next year. Last year, it was goaltending. UPL's taken a huge step backwards. Every time they have something that you think is worthy of developing, there's a setback. And that's what happens when you don't have enough veterans on the roster that can carry you through the tough times. And when you have young players that haven't been there, done that, and they lack the confidence, they let small things become big things. And I think that's the story of the season. They had an okay start through 20 games, and they felt some adversity. And then the first sign of the adversity, they gave up on their coach, and they let their season literally get out of hand. And now I think they're trying to crawl back and start to build up a little bit again. But what's also a reason for that? You're 4 or 5 games under 500. Teams aren't taking you as seriously anymore. You're going to win a few games that you probably shouldn't win. Once they get back to 500, I could see the same falling apart happen once again.
Yeah, and I think my biggest disappointment, everything you're saying is spot on. I think fans feel the same way. And I think my biggest disappointment this year, Bunty, has just been the lack of care about important details. I mean, I kind of talk about it at every post game on my goals against or win more, lots more, percent about tape downs. But I tweet this out after last game. You have 3 minutes to go in a game, you're up 2. And the Sabres, out of the last, this is all the faceoffs in the final, 4 or 5 minutes.
How is that possible? They were winning the faceoff battle the entire game by a good margin, and then this happens.
Yeah. So out of there, what I have here, it was like out of the last 8 faceoffs in their own end, defensive end, and 3 minutes to go, they only won a single faceoff, just a single one. Both goals came off of losing a draw, hemmed in, and that's how the Sabres lose. They find great ways to do that. The overtime goal, Tage gets tripped at the blue line, causes a breakaway. I think it was the tying goal. They just let the guy all alone in the slot with like 4 guys circling him. I mean, I'm sure you've all seen the screenshots of it. It's just little things that are super preventable if they focused and cared about those details. And the Sabres would be just fine if they had that, because I feel like every time we're on here, Bun, or every time, we're doing a post-game show or just tweeting about it, it's always really preventable things that it's not due to a lack of skill. It's not due to whatever reason. It's due to a lack of care on important details, whether that be, the way they're being coached or, just their inability to care about those details. But I really don't think it is, and really hope it's not. It's something there. And I get it. The team has been kind of run like the Wild West, and recently where they've just been able to do what they want, not have a ton of structure, and they're still learning about it. I mean, the quote came out like a month ago that under Granato, the Sabres did not box out in front of that at all. That was not a part of their game plan, which is absolutely absurd that that's happening, and makes sense why Owen Power is getting ripped left, right, and center online about his inability to move anyone in front of the net. But that has gotten better throughout the course of the season. Like, what I keep trying to tell myself about this team is they were in such bad place in terms of structure, systems, and all that. It's not going to be an overnight fix. That a lot of these things, granted, I want them to be done a lot sooner than I think they should be, but I'm hoping that things start to click more on that front. We're not going to see these massive lapses in judgment where they just lose games because they're thinking about the wrong things or whatever. But yeah, it's actually been a crazy thing. But it's not crazy, Bunty. We get named, ridiculed that we're the Positivity Podcast. Mm-hmm. Be sure, if you're watching along at home, comment, be your biggest disappointment, something you're positive about, because it is, we're all mad, we're all angry, we're all upset. But there have been some things we can look back on, like, okay, this was good. This was a good signing by Kevin Adams. This player's, taking a step forward we weren't expecting. Bunty, what at this point in the season, we're almost halfway, what's something when you put your head down at night before you go to bed, what's something that can ease your mind about the Buffalo Sabres right now?
There's really not much. I know you're trying. You put the segment in here, so I would say something.
Trying.
I did have one other thing I did want to add.
Yeah, hop in.
You were saying how we know the team is skilled, but it's the small things. I think that's one thing that fans get confused about with I don't think they understand often what we mean when we say they're skilled. Talent-wise, and Zucker is going to be actually the direction I go.
Yeah, that's the only one.
Skill-wise, they are able to do impressive things at a high level that would compare well against the rest of the league. The problem is you don't win with just skill. You have to have grit. You have to win timely faceoffs. You have to defensively know where to be in crucial moments. You have to know when you have a shot at icing a puck for an empty net goal, or flick the puck and hope to kill another 10 seconds. This team doesn't have those traits. So yes, I still think they do have some high-end skill. You see what Tage Thompson, Dahlin can do. You can see some of the saves that UPL can make. That obviously is skill. But can UPL make the save when it matters the most? He hasn't. Can Tage Thompson not turn the puck over when it's a crucial moment in overtime? In the past, he hasn't shown that ability to be careful with the puck. He's a sloppy puck handler. He's very good at puck handling. I would say that he's an above average puck handler, but his risk assessment in that moment, he failed. Can Dylan Cousins be in the right spot defensively when it matters? Can Samuelson know not to ice it? These are the things where they fall short, and some of these prospects that we want to develop just have not gotten to that level that was expected. Samuelson has been a flop compared to what he should be. Cousins is not.
I think he's been a lot better, though, since coming back from injury.
He has been better, but he's still not what he needs to be.
Yeah.
A Cousins is not what he needs to be. A Quinn is honestly not even close to what he needs to be. When we're seeing Yuri Kulik play and we're like, oh my God, he looks really solid. When we see Zach Benson, we're like, oh my God, he looks solid. That's a sign that the other guys aren't doing what they need to be, because Kulik and Benson really haven't been out of this world. They've just been simply okay.
Yes.
That's an indictment on Cousins, Quinn, and the other players that we're looking at right now. But what am I going to be positive about if you want to get that little ticker up?
Let's get it up, Bunty. Let's give the people what they want.
There's a few things I'll be positive. Number one, Zucker was the best signing that this team has made in years as far as free agency. 14 goals, on pace for around 30 this year. He's been phenomenal. And I've had two thoughts about Zucker. One, I think he obviously has been a productive NHL player. You bring a guy like that in here, it does make an impact. We've seen him fight to try to rile up the team. We've seen him do a lot of things to try to get the team going. And yet the team doesn't respond to it. That tells me that the roster next to him is not what it needs to be. And then the other thing I'd say about Zucker is he started this year on the third line. And now he's starting to get more ice time and really start to contribute at a higher level. To me, that's a positive about Zucker, but it's also a negative about the rest of your roster, because the fact of it is, it's like a running back in the NFL. You don't have to be a good running back, but if you get 200 carries a season, you should still get like 600, 700 yards rushing at the worst. To me, I don't know if Zucker's suddenly putting up these numbers because he is playing really well, which I do think he's playing all right. But I also think part of it is like the guys that were supposed to be ahead of him aren't doing their job. So now we're being forced to rely on him more than what we ever would have expected, a 32-year-old or whatever age he is. And then I would say another positive, I'd say two players that I feel all right about. I haven't checked advanced analytics, so people can grill me if I'm wrong on this. I feel like Dahlin has shown that he's the most valuable player on this team. That losing streak coincided with him missing a lot of time, and really the worst of it was when he was gone. And then David suddenly started looking better. I know they're 3-1-1 the last 5, but that's with him being back. And then Bo Byram, I think, has really taken a step this year. But now you have to worry, will Bo Byram want to be part of this in future years in the mess? And then...
Well, he's talked about wanting to be a number one defenseman on the team he's on. And
I think Bo Byram could be a really solid piece to this Sabres team moving forward. And if you have to ask me a few negatives, I don't feel good about Tage Thompson right now. Even with his point production, I'm starting to think Tage is more just a skill point getter than he is an all-around guy. And that concerns me because there's a lot of guys in the NHL that can put pucks in the net. Jeff Skinner was great at putting the pucks in the net. I didn't want Jeff Skinner on the Sabres because I thought even though he could score, he did a lot of things bad and was a bad example for a lot of other players around the team. Not as a person, but like the hockey player. And I don't know if Tage Thompson has that complete game. I thought he had it in him. I think he might still have it in him, but I'm a little concerned about him. And then
on Tage real quick too, like the whole goal of all of this is to win the Stanley Cup. I can't think of a single first line center for an NHL, a team that's won the Stanley Cup that, has shown the kind of lapse in defensive responsibility that we've seen in Tage. Like in last game, look back. Folks at home, the video I posted after the game, there's a shot that went through make it a 1-goal game. Thompson didn't block it, goes in the back of the net. Overtime, gets picked at the blue line, goes in the back of the net. Like you don't see, Sidney Crosby's a different breed. You don't see a guy like him doing that. You don't see McKinnon or, these high-end first-line centers who can put the puck in the net. But when it's time at the end of the game, they hunker down defensively, or at least if they can't, they're not on the ice in those moments. Like I get Tage your first-line center, your guy, but if he's not going to do those things, like he should not be on the ice up to with 2-3 minutes to go. Like that's why you brought in these kind of fourth-line guys that, are at least going to shut it down defensively. Like, I don't care if we score an empty netter, just win the game at that point. But go ahead, Bunty.
And that's a huge concern of mine right now because it's like, you know what? If you're going to be number one center, you need to give me a little bit more than just offense. And I don't know if Tage has that in him. And when we brought Dylan Cousins in, Dylan Cousins was supposed to be the guy that had a two-way game. Where is it? It doesn't exist right now. But yet he's still on the ice with 20 seconds left in a situation where the Sabres need to clear the puck, and they can't win a faceoff. There's just so many things I'm concerned about this team overall. And then I'll even say Lindy Ruff calling a timeout. What are you doing with 20 seconds left calling a timeout? I know what he's thinking. He's like, I need to get my team in a defensively responsible situation. I need the right guys on the ice. You're playing the Colorado Avalanche. They have an offensive zone faceoff. You just gave them time to not only catch their breath, but then draw up a damn play. Yeah. What's more important, having the right guys on the ice or Colorado knowing what they're doing? I would have just taken the chance and not taken the timeout, because realistically, it comes down to one thing. If you want to really hold on to that game and have zero chance of Colorado scoring, win the damn faceoff.
That's all it comes down to.
That's all it really mattered. Like, if Colorado wins the faceoff, they were going to cycle the puck. And then you hear after the game, Jason Zucker saying, well, sometimes you got to be passive in these situations. And then Lindy Ruff is saying, well, you don't want to be passive in that situation. You want to be aggressive. Let me think about, like, I didn't play a hockey at the level you did. I played hockey for fun growing up. I don't know the ins and outs of strategy the way you know. But I know on a power play, when it's a 5-on-4, you want the box and you're trying to keep people contained to the outside. But on a 6-on-5, and you're going up against some of the best scorers in the league, like you have McKinnon, you got McCarr, and all these other incredible talents on the Avalanche. I want to pressure the puck, because I am thinking I am one tip puck, one errant pass away from clearing the zone, and then the game is likely over. Instead, they're sitting back. You're letting them come at you. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's like how a lot of Bills fans, when they see off coverage on like a 3rd and 5 or something, and like there is an actual strategy to it. Like, you want players to make the pass in front so then you can tackle at the wherever they catch it. But I know there's points to what the Sabres are doing there, but it's just so frustrating to me. And they had so many opportunities to win that game. And when McCarr scored with 2 minutes left, I just knew in the back of my head, I'm like, they're going to get another quality chance. And let's be real, I know expected goals allowed, like, it doesn't always quantify how many goals you really should allow or shouldn't allow. It's all math and probabilities and stuff put together. But when the number is like 2.64 or like 2.7 and UPL allows 6 goals, like, is UPL going to actually step up in a moment where it matters? Because I think UPL plays solid in the net for 70% of games. But you ever notice he's in net in all of these late game situations, allowing a bad goal at a bad time? Like, he is responsible for this too.
I mean, I don't know, like, out of those last 3, though, like, I don't know which one you can be like, oh, that's a bad goal by UPL, because
you're right. I'm not talking specifically
the
Avalanche game. I'm talking overall. If you go based on his advanced numbers, up until last year, he was a below average goalie in the NHL. Last year, he looked incredible. And then this year, he looks like an average to maybe slightly below average goalie in the NHL. And like the same thing with Levi. When Levi's in Rochester, he's putting up 920+ save percentages, looking like the best goalie in the minor leagues. And then he comes to Buffalo and he can't save a basic shot. It's that's why I know there's a difference between playing in the minors to playing in the pros, but the difference shouldn't be as vast as what we're seeing it on display. When you're Jack Quinn and you have 27 goals in 45 games as a 21-year-old in the AHL, how do you go 25 games into a season and have 1 goal and the only goal be an empty net goal? Like, the same thing like with like Devin Levi. How do you have a 920 save percentage in Rochester and then you can't do anything in the NHL? And some people say, well, okay, you put numbers in the minor leagues, it's easier down there. For a goalie, sometimes it's harder to play goalie in the minors than the National Hockey League, because you have defensemen that aren't in the right spots that are screening you that make things more difficult. And then I'll just go a couple more players that are frustrating me of late. Owen Power. I mean, like, I still believe he's going to be a really good player one day. And I'll contribute more of this to just like growing pains at the current moment. But he really does need to play better than what he has. And it's frustrating on that, to that degree. Like, I'm not going to be as hard on guys like Malenstein and Lafferty that are fourth liners that are not here to be high contributors. But what
Zach Malenstein is the highest of contributors, Bunty.
But I need the guys that are part of the future to give me more flashes of why they are the future. Because I can forgive mistakes. Every player is going to make mistakes on that ice. but I need flashes to go along with the mistakes in order to justify why I'm forgiving it. And I don't know, man. I'm just glad I'm not talking about Jeff Skinner sucking it up or Casey Middlestat right now, because if Casey Middlestat was going off in Colorado, I think I'd be having a lot more pain right now. But I think the one thing we have learned is that Casey Middlestat wasn't that great of a player, and that he was a player that benefited from being on a crappy team.
Yeah. And appreciate everyone commenting along, the near 1,700 of you watching at home. Appreciate that. And yeah, things right now aren't great in Buffalo. We all know that. But Rochester, though, things, they're going in a direction, which is good. They're first in the East. Their guys have looked really good. And yeah, this Rochester team, let me pull up the stats real quick. They have been StreamYard's kicking my ass right now, Bunty, in terms of setting up the two screens. But Rochester's an area where, granted, no one wants to hear, this is a moral victory, little hope in the future. But guys we want to see produce in Rochester are doing so right now. Isak Rosean's over a point per game. A lot of their top guys there. Levi's looked really good since going back down there, which is very relieving. Bunty, I don't know if you have any thoughts on, as we get through like the back half of the season, I feel like we always kind of see guys get some shots. We saw it last year with like Kulik, Rosean getting opportunities. Do you see a guy like, Isak Rosean coming in, hopefully pushing guys like, Jack Quinn, pushing guys like Peterka, Cousins, who aren't at the level they should be to be better, because that spot's not going to be there for them forever. We saw Jack Quinn was in the stands for a couple of games, came back, scored a couple of goals. Like, bring up a guy from Rochester, I think, going to elevate these younger guys in Buffalo who aren't at the level they should be right now?
Yeah, there's a few guys that I would like to see that are currently in Rochester get an opportunity with the Sabres at some point this year. I don't think like the weird thing about Rochester right now is they're playing really well. They have quality prospects, but they don't really have anybody in their system right now where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see this guy on the Sabres. I don't think they have like the high end like prospects that we thought we had in recent years. Like we all kind of felt like Jiri Kulik is going to be a good NHL player down the road. Like he already kind of showed it right away. The same with when they had Jack Quinn. Like we knew Quinn was going to be good. We know some of these other guys, but we're not really feeling as I'm not really feeling as high on the guys that are currently down there. Like Isak Rosen, I'd like to see him in the Sabres, but do I really think he's an impact guy in the NHL at the next level? I can't really say that. Like maybe he'll be all right, but I feel like he's more of a middle six player, like a third, second liner that maybe has the potential to be good. But we've been overstating the value of those type of guys for the last 5 years, so last 10 years. So I really can't say I'm optimistic. Like I can't say that, oh, he's going to be the guy, because then I could be saying the same thing about Jiri Kulik, and I don't know if Jiri Kulik is going to be the guy. I think he might be a piece, but I don't know if he's going to be the guy. And you look at some of the other guys, like Savoy is now gone. Cousins and Quinn were supposed to be there. They're not. Benson never even went to Rochester.
Yeah.
I would say right now, Roseanne is a guy I want to see at some point just to get some minutes and see how he does. But a player I really don't hear a lot of, but I would love to actually see what he could do in the NHL is Nikita Novikov. He's been really solid defensively in Rochester. He's not going to really light it up from a points production standpoint, but he's one of those late round picks that really has turned into a good player at that level. I don't know what his upside is, but
he's a good defensive D-man in that perspective. That's something that I think everyone has been clamoring for up in Buffalo for a while. And again, not wanting to rush a guy like that up, but that could be someone, we see a late call up toward the end of the season. We get another injury on the back end. Instead of, I love Dennis Gilbert. Instead of throwing him a game, in game 74 of the year, call up Novikov and see what happens on that front.
And then you have like the disappointment of like Noah Ostlund right now. There's nothing right there. Like that's scary. Like Noah Ostlund, you got to go to the bottom of the point sheet to see where he's at with, I think, 1 point in 11 games. Anton Wahlberg, it's taken him a little bit to get things figured out down there. And like, it's not like he's playing bad, you didn't expect things right away. Like, he's going to be more of a physical player. He's not going to be the high-end point production type guy, but 10 points in 25 games, taking a little bit of time. Like, and I would say that was expected. But you continue to go through some of the different guys, and Hellenius right now, he has 17 points in 28 games. Like, that's solid. Like, he's just got drafted. He went straight to the American Hockey League, so he's younger than the entire league. So I would say that's a decent debut for Hellenius. But when you've been hearing this guy is pro ready, like some people are thinking like NHL pro ready right off the bat, like that's not a guy that's going to come to Buffalo and get you 40, 50 points right away. Like, he's going to probably be like a 20 to like 25 point guy, maybe 30 point guy in the NHL if he got good minutes. But if he's getting good minutes, that means that your second line is still a mess, or your third line is still a mess. So it's really tough to be super encouraged about what's going on down there, outside of Devin Levi 11-2-1 with a .914 save percentage. But like, even that, like we talked about, like he's at the point where like he dominates lower levels. Talk to me when he does it in the NHL, and this is really an issue the Sabres are in, an issue that Ottawa's been in, that Detroit's been in, that Montreal's been in. We are in a league right now where you have to it's really hard to win with free agency without overspending. And if you overspend on the wrong guys, you're just extending your period of mediocrity. If you trade for the wrong players, you're extending that period. So teams like the Sabres, Ottawa, Detroit, Montreal, they're being forced to be extra patient with these farm systems. And the struggle of it is, and it's not just a Buffalo issue. Like, obviously we're struggling with 13 years and no playoffs. They're struggling in Detroit. They're a team that's used to going to the playoffs every year and winning championships.
Yep.
They're 5 years for them probably feels like 13 years to us. But here's ultimately, I think the real struggle is we're not going to know fully on a guy like Cousins, Quinn, Kulik, maybe even Benson, Samuelson, like a lot of these guys, until they're probably 25 years old. And if you wait till they're 25, like all of them are to that point, because there's some of them are still a couple years away, and others like Benson and Kulik, they're 19. Much farther away.
Yeah.
If you wait until half these guys are 25 and they don't end up being what you projected them to be, well, then you just went through a 15-year drought, and then you're starting over.
Yeah.
But
that's the hard part of it all.
But if you don't wait it out, and then you do trade them away, and you don't get the right talent back, you're in the same spot. So it's this whole situation where like Sabres fans right now are like, be aggressive, make a move, do something. And I kind of agree with part of that, because I don't think this core is getting it done. But at the same point, I understand why Kevin Adams is afraid of doing that, because that could blow up in his face, and it's a really bad situation. And I was banking on them to take that leap this year. I didn't expect it last year. I thought it was going to happen this year. And what it ultimately comes down to is you don't get the benefit of the doubt when you're a losing organization and you have all the issues that Buffalo deals with. And that's why Kevin Adams should have struck when he had the ability to after the 91-point season. He should have brought in some veterans as a safety valve, and his failure to do so has basically put this franchise in a situation where I could see this playoff drought going 15-plus years. Yeah,
that's just the nature of things now. It's everything we've talked about all year, where it's tough to make that jump to the NHL and have it be consistent. Besides that flash in the pan year with 91 points, it's been basically the same song and dance, and forever it's just been a lack of consistency. We'll see a couple great games here and there, a good little run, the wheels fall completely off the bus. But something I think, fun time this year, World Juniors, at least I love this, Bunty. I love watching the games. A little check-in on a couple of Sabres guys who I thought have done well on the international stage, because I think we've seen in years prior, a lot of young guys can really take that next step in their game here, at least in terms of maybe fans noticing them as prospects. I thought Brody Zemmer looks really good. Wahlberg's been great. Him and Hellenius right now in the semifinals. Finland is up 3-2 in that game. And yeah, I thought Just the Sabres prospects in general have looked pretty good in this tournament. Couple games left. USA plays a little bit later tonight for fans wanting to watch some hockey. Right before the Sabres game, which is at 10 o'clock tonight. Sabres and Knights, Bunty. This is always a fun contest. Going up against Jack Eichel, Victor Olofsson. Things tonight can be a lot of fun or the worst night to ever be a Sabres fan. Eichel's plus 140 to score a goal tonight. Olofsson plus 200. I feel like at this point, put them both together and you're looking pretty good because it just seems like it's going to be written in the stars. We're going to be up till 1 a.m. watching this game. Eichel's going to score his 48th goal of the game on us, and it's going to be mayhem. But what do you think out of tonight's game? Sabres are plus 170 money line as well, so they're big underdogs.
So I'll be real. Like the smart play is probably to go against the Sabres until they start showing us any reason to go for them. But Maniac does have a point. Like the Sabres aren't as bad as what their record is. So at some point you think like luck will have it where things will turn around. I just don't think the luck turns around when you're playing one of like the top teams in like the Western Conference, who just so happens to have your former star player who wants to kick your ass every time you go up against them. So I don't feel good about the Sabres' chances tonight. It was like this. It was a similar situation when they were playing Dallas. It was like plus, like I think Dallas was like minus 215. And when you see odds like that, you know that they're not going to win. Like Vegas knows stuff. Like a lot of people like to say, well, it's just probabilities and people putting cash and moving lines. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think Vegas has insider information on a lot of sporting events that happen, and they have very advanced computers that are really good at looking into matchups and knowing who has a high likelihood of winning. And I think most of the time in sports, outside of like stuff like baseball, where like it could be a pitching matchup or like something unique like that, I feel like most of the time in sports, the better team is going to win most of the time.
Yeah.
And like when there's a noticeable difference, like when you're having the Sabres versus the Flyers, or like the Sabres versus like the Islanders or random teams like that all suck. Like, yeah, things can bounce around, but like when you're like a really good team facing a really bad team and you're home, you're probably gonna win. So I don't know. I just don't have much optimism with this team right now. Any given night, the puck can go your way, but I wouldn't predict it to happen.
Yeah, it's tough, but I'm hoping for this game. We saw it when Eichel first returned to Buffalo, the mayhem that ensued after that game, the energy that really circled the Buffalo Sabres in that moment through the rest of that season. I'm just hoping in my really dumb heart of hearts, Bunty, that something similar can happen tonight where this is a very young team. Like we've been saying it forever, but they're the youngest team in the NHL. Young teams can really build off of energy and momentum, and I'm young and dumb. One good thing happens, I'm rolling from there. So I'm hoping something similar can happen tonight. You know, Tuck and Krebs return back to Vegas. Something big can happen there. And getting a big win on the road against a top team in the NHL could do a lot of good for this team in terms of flipping that switch in their brain that tells them, okay, we belong here. If we do X, Y, and Z right every single night, we can win basically any hockey game we play.
Why wouldn't they be thinking that already? Like, it's not like these guys haven't been in the league for multiple years already. Like,
but they haven't had any success with that. So I'm hoping that they're not going to do it. I want them to do the small things right tonight. They win the game and they realize hockey is so much easier if we do the right things, and everything's fine from here on out. And they win 1 million Stanley Cups. Can I just have that?
Yeah. Where I struggle with Lindy Ruff being the head coach, and I love Lindy.
Defensive shells.
I love Lindy, and I was happy when they hired Lindy to be head coach, and I hope he can figure things out here. Where I struggle with Lindy being the head coach of this team is that part of like sports, you have it or you don't. Another part of sports is development. Like a lot of why the Bills, why you hear people in football talk about culture is once you establish the right culture and like you have the quarterback, like having the quarterback obviously makes a difference in football.
The Patriot way.
But then you just look for archetypes. Like you if your defense is good, you keep drafting similar sized linebackers with the mental capacity to like absorb information. So they do what you want them to do. Like a lot of culture is finding a way to where your general manager, your head coach are on the same page, and you find these archetypes of people to play roles that you want. And when a veteran leaves, you have somebody in ready to step up that has learned from that person to fill that void, fill that responsibility. And I look back to like two different eras of the Sabres with Lindy. The 98-99 era, when they had Hasek and they had players like a bunch of different guys. You had like Jitnik back there. You had Pekka. Like Mike Pekka is a great example. Like Ray. You had a lot of tough, rugged Barnaby. You had a lot of tough, rugged guys. Not a lot of high end skill. Like sure, you had Shatan and you had different guys like Audette throughout the years.
Jason Woolley, of course.
Jason Woolley, Schmelik. Like there's a lot of different guys, but those teams didn't really have high end skill. And they knew it. They knew they weren't going to win games by just outskating you or by sniping every time and playing pretty hockey. They knew that they needed Hasek to steal some games. They knew they had to be hard to play against in the defensive zone, and that they had to be rugged in front of that. They had to screen the goalie. They had to get rebounds. They had to forecheck. They had to do the difficult things well on a nightly basis, but they did it. And that collection of talent they were not an expensive salary cap team. There wasn't even a salary cap at that point, but they found ways to go back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals. They lose Hasek. They realize we're not going to steal games. It takes them three years in the lockout to rebuild. What do they do then? They realize that the game is setting up rules to more penalties. It's setting up to be a faster game. Yep. So what do? They get a young core. They get guys. And obviously Finneganoff was part of the other teams, but you have a Finneganoff, you have Roy, you have Pominville, Vanek. You add that on top of some veterans like Drury, Briere. You have some other complementary pieces like a Greer that comes in. You have defensemen like Lundman, Tallender. And you still had a solid goalie. Like Ryan Miller wasn't like the greatest goalie of all time, but at his best, he was one of the better goalies in the league. He was
Vezina winner.
Yeah, Vezina winner one time, Olympic goalie for USA. You built a team in a different mold, but you saw what was happening in the NHL, and they found a way to go forward. What I struggle with this team right now is they don't do the small things properly. And I don't know if the small things are stuff that they're going to be able to teach and develop into these kids, or if they're always going to be these skill-dependent soft players that are going to always want to get it done their way. And what I thought was going to be interesting with Lindy this year was I was hoping he was going to be able to instill some of these qualities that are needed to win hockey in them. And what I'm seeing right now is that they're not translating to this young roster, which is why you have really two options, I think, going forward. Right now, you tough it out for the season. But I think your two options really are you either need a head coach for this roster that is just going to let them play free, not worry about accountability and structure, and just be like, you know what, it's going to be a free-for-all, but you guys are highly skilled. We're just going to let you guys play to your strengths. Or I think you need to make a bunch of moves and start hammering out which of these guys aren't going to be able to pick up on the things that I need them to do. And then you build a team that, while might be less talented overall, is more conducive to winning hockey. Maybe that means in the future you get rid of a Tage Thompson and you try to get a couple players in return that fit more of what you need. I'm not saying I want them to. I'm not actively like saying trade Tage Thompson, but I'm thinking like some of these guys, by the time the Sabres get good, they're going to already be at a certain age point where you might not want them to really be that guy on your roster. And when I see what a Zach Benson can be, when I see what a Yuri Kulik can be, I really like those guys as potential third liners on this team the next couple of years. But I don't want them to be in a spot where they're going to be second liners too quick.
When you look back at old Sabres teams too,
I think there's going to have to be some moves that are made to round up this roster into what it needs to be.
Yeah, we look at like 2007. You have the third line of Vanek, Pominville, Drury, or not Drury, Roy, or whatever. Like, you have your young guys there who bring a spark, energy, and they learn to play the game the right way, in my opinion, where you're not rushing guys up to be that first line guy off the get-go, because that difference between the junior level, the AHL to the NHL, like, that is such a big jump each time and such a different style of hockey at each level. Like, you can get away being super skilled and not doing the little things right your whole career until you get to the NHL. Then you're going to have to do them right if you want any sort of team success, because everyone else is just as good as you. You have to do things that, other people don't want to do. I mean, the age-old expression that every hockey player has heard from the time they're put their first skates on is, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. And as cliche and as dumb as I thought it was as a kid, like, it is a true statement, like, especially at this level where the Sabres, that's all they have to do, work hard and do the little things right in their own end. And they are going to have the success, because we keep seeing night in, night out, the reason they lose games at the end is because they're not doing the right things. They're, losing faceoffs, icing the puck, taking penalties, just leaving guys open. I really didn't like their 5-on-6 structure last game either. I thought it was, it was passive, but they did nothing right. They left guys open. But yeah, they take care of that and they win the game. And that's not a full 60-minute thing either. That's just hunkering down with 5 minutes to go in a game you're up to. This is not a revolutionary thought or revolutionary saying. It's just taking care of business when you have to, blocking shots that you don't want to do, but you've lost at that point. They lost 14 of the last 17 games. Maybe we block a shot and try to win one here, try to string together, winning 4 out of your last 5, or would have been 3 out of the last 4, whatever it was. But yeah, it's disappointing, but we're at 2,700 viewers, Bunty, almost an hour. Do you have any final thoughts here? Keep things going.
I just have one final thought about what we're talking about right now. I guess what I struggle with is, do they believe they can teach these traits into a player? Like, do high up hockey minds, like head coaches and general managers, do they believe that they can make a player grittier? At what point do you say a player is what they are? Like a Dylan Cousins coming out of junior, he was supposed to be a two-way player.
Yeah.
Why hasn't that developed? And is it on Cousins? Is it on the Sabres? Is there room left to grow? And what point do you just say, like, he's not what we thought he was going to be? But if he's not going to be that player with that two-way game, well, then his 55, 60-point upside isn't as impressive. Like, if you got a 50-point, 60-point upside, but you're a two-way player, you're a second-line center. If you're a 50-point upside, you can't play defense, and you're a minus 15, you're a third-line center. So that changes your value. So they obviously thought he was worth it when they gave him a $7 million a year contract. So I guess at the end of the day, I believe deep down they still believe that they can instill these traits in them. But I'll end it with one last football analogy, because I'm obviously a lot more experienced with the football side of things. I love hockey, but football is where I have more connections. The reason they always say not to hire college head coaches in the NFL, it's not that college head coaches don't have the ability to be successful NFL head coaches, but it's because in college, so much of the game is recruiting, where if you're at a really good program and you recruit at a high level, you're going to win due to the talent you have on display. So if you're coaching at Ohio State or Alabama or any of these powerhouses, Georgia, you're going to play and you're going to win 90% of your games.
Yeah.
Just because, not 90, but like 80% of games, just because you're more talented. And then what you do in those few big games determine kind of how good of a coach are you when the talent is equal. And sometimes when you see an Urban Meyer go to Jacksonville, it doesn't work out. Why? Because for the first time in his career, he's at a talent deficit where now he needs to coach better than his opponent. he needs to strategize better. He needs to put his players in the right positions to succeed in order to win. And I'll throw this analogy with the Sabres, and not necessarily just on the coaching, but with the players. You kind of hit on this at home, hit this home a little bit. These players, when they're in junior, they're the best in the world. These are guys that went top 10. They're not dealing with adversity when they're playing junior hockey. They're putting up 70, 80, 90, 100 points. A guy like Zach Benson was near 100 points his final year in juniors. A Matt Savoy could have been a 100-point plus player if he played a full season last year in juniors. So these guys, they're used to being the best. And the whole thought process of why you put them in Rochester for a year or two is because you're also going to be playing guys that are good enough to be playing amongst the best in the world, but they're not quite there yet. You want to build up your confidence. You want to work on your skills, because even though you're the best 17, 18, 19-year-old in the world, when you go to the NHL, you're not going to be the best when you're playing guys that are 27, 28, 29, 30. And what I think has happened with the way the Sabres have done things is that they have flooded the NHL with a bunch of young kids who were not ready for it. Yeah. And instead of working on the things that they need to work on in order to be the best versions of themselves, they're trying to develop them on what will be conducive to getting the Sabres to win hockey games. But that is not always in tandem with what you need to be working on as a 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old.
Yeah.
What's happening? We're seeing stunted growth by these guys. We're not seeing the leaps that we need to see from these guys. And then we get angry because they're not what we thought they were going to be. I think the Sabres development plan is a mess. And I think I think it was bad. Then they corrected it. And then now they kind of gone a little bit in the wrong direction by pushing like Benson and Kulik on the Sabres so quickly. And not to say that Kulik like wasn't already really good in the American Hockey League. And now they're trying to give some of these other guys a chance in the American Hockey League. But I think they just have some flaws with the way that they've taken things as an organization, and they're paying the price.
Yeah, because it's not just a one-player issue where we had all of our eggs in this one player who's just not panning out. This is basically every young player in the Sabres organization is taking a step back and struggling. That on its own, I think merits an issue in the organization, whether that be development within, the team on the ice and practice, like how they're running things on that front, or just an overall organizational issue of pushing guys to the NHL too quickly, which I agree with. And I think we're seeing the issues stemming from that. And I think a big issue on that too is with the Sabres being so young, for the longest time, their leadership group has basically been guys under the age of 24. You had Eichel as your
– shouldn't be the leadership group of the team.
Yeah.
Not that they didn't want it, but at some point you need the leaders to not just be people that are good people or people that are going to work hard. You need people that have been there, that have done it. That's why Zucker looks like a leader whenever he's out on the ice, because you see him getting in a fight in a moment where he needs to pump up the team. And yes, Thompson has done that. Yes, Cousins has done that. It carries more weight when you're a player that has played alongside Sidney Crosby. It carries more weight when you're a 5-time 20-goal scorer for teams that have gotten to the playoffs. Scoring 40 goals in Buffalo when you haven't done when it didn't lead to winning, it doesn't carry the same weight. And I just don't know if the Sabres have voices. Like when I look at the Sabres team, I don't see anybody that outside of maybe a Zucker where I'd be like, yeah, your voice is going to motivate me to do what I need to do.
Yeah, and the biggest thing too is how those voices show up when adversity's at its worst. Like the thing that always like sticks in my mind right away on something like that, like I forget which Stanley Cup final it was. I think it was when the Penguins were playing the Sharks. Evgeny Malkin has a wide open net, misses, and I think Crosby might have been mic'd up, but they always like show the video of like the guys on the bench, like, oh, I can't believe he missed that. He like gets on the guys on the bench, like, hey, support your teammate, like he's gonna be fine. Gino gets back to the bench. Crosby's like, shake it off, you're gonna get one. Malkin goes and scores a massive goal for the Penguins. They win the Stanley Cup. Like it's the leadership in adverse moments, and the Sabres had so many difficult moments and their inability to get out of them is strictly due, in my opinion, to that leadership of not being able to will these young kids out. And I think to the kids' credit, kids, it's not on them because yes, it's on them in some capacity of not getting it out, but they were put in situations where they're basically destined to fail at, whether that be, we're going to give our captain to Eichel and he's going to try to will this team all on his own. We saw what happened there. They give it to Dahlin, which, I'm excited to see what he does with it. He's taken a big step in his game. I'm hoping others follow suit. But, even with Okposo, he goes to Florida and he's like, yeah, we assumed we're out of the playoffs in November, whatever that quote was, something along that line. The team just kind of gave up. You wonder why we're in the spot we're at. It's, culture, leadership, all those big buzzwords, but it is true for this organization, Bunty. We're nearing on 3K. If you got any other final thoughts or?
No, I think we pretty much hit on it all. And it's unfortunate that after 20 games, we thought we had a good idea what this team was. And then the next 20 games, they punked us and how they put themselves in a hole where we're not even halfway through the season. We're two games shy. And unless they pull some type of miracle run here, it's going to be a 14th straight season with no playoffs. And it just sucks because you look at the Eastern Conference and there's so much mediocrity around it. And at some point, I understand there's an organizational strategy in place that obviously Kevin Adams and Terry Pegula are aligned at the hip with their thought process on things. But at some point, you want there to be accountability at the top. I've understood Kevin Adams' logic on a lot of the moves that he's made over the last 5 years. And I understand he's in a really difficult position and that it's not easy. But at the end of the day, it's his job to turn the Sabres into a winner. And he's had 5 years to do so. And while just changing GMs every year isn't a winning strategy either, as we saw with his predecessors, at some point, they need to bring somebody in that knows what they're doing. Yes. What do all of these GMs that the Sabres have had in recent years have in common? They lacked the prior GM experience, whether that be you look back to Murray. He wasn't a GM prior. Yes, he had experience in a front office. I'm forgetting the Botterill. He was an assistant GM. Kevin Adams, he wasn't even in the front office. So we keep giving these guys the responsibility to turn certain things around when none of them have ever won at any level. What I think the Sabres need to do, I think they need to pony up and overpay by a ton because they're not going to get anybody quality without overpaying by a bunch, and bring in a proven winning general manager that knows what it takes to construct a quality roster. And unfortunately, I don't think that's in their plans. A lot of people have been hinting at the rumor that they think it might be Karmanos who might be promoted within at some point in time. And you know what? We don't know how much of the decisions of this organization are from the analytics side versus Kevin Adams' side of things. And it's entirely possible we might have the greatest analytics team in hockey and they just get ignored and their opinions aren't valued. But that's at least not what the Sabres, like the vibe they're giving off, at least. So I think this fan base will literally freak the hell out if it's an internal promotion at that spot. But it's tough, man, because you keep saying year after year after year after year, maybe it's this year, and at some point it just feels like maybe we just need Toronto, Tampa Bay, and Florida to fall off a map. But Florida's the kind of contrary. Florida wasn't that great, and then they just made a bunch of bold moves, traded for a million players like Kachuk, Reinhardt, and all these other guys, and now they're a great team. Florida has barely any homegrown talent. As far I'm sure they got homegrown talent, but like as far as like their stars, their stars are guys they acquired. So it shows like there's the ability to make moves, but then again, they have palm trees and we don't. So that makes a big difference according to at least one NHL general manager. So maybe we just got to start growing the palm trees and we'll be fine.
Yeah, at this point, I mean, I think we've tried everything except trying to grow some palm trees in Western New York. But the Sabres have just, one misstep after another. But tonight, 10 o'clock puck drop in Vegas seems like that should be a crime. 10 o'clock puck drop on the East Coast. I get it. We got different time zones. But we got to watch a Buffalo Sabres game.
You just stay awake for the whole game?
Someone's got to tweet it. But I'll be up.
Right.
I'll be covering it, watching along. If you're watching along too, tweet at myself at Gatesy35. Tweet at Bunty at Mike_Bunt. This has been the Crossing Swords podcast brought to you by Batavia Downs Gaming and Hotel. And Bunty, I'm not going to say it because sometimes our signals are crossed, but our swords always are. Good luck, Sabres.